Well, without further ado, let's start this. So thank you again for joining us on this, the latest in the Planet IT webinar series. We've taken it's been a few months since we last did one of these, mainly because we did some in-person events and obviously summer and all that. So we're now back into that kind of autumnal cycle, and we're going to see more of this content coming out from us. So today we're talking about using the power of AI to combat the new breed of email cybersecurity threats, and we are lucky enough to be joined by a speaker from Mimecast today as well to help us navigate these murky waters, as it were. So, it's going to be a very interesting one, and hopefully some insight for all of you about what we're seeing and kind of the email threats that are now cropping up their nasty little heads. So for those of you who are joining us for maybe the first time and you don't know maybe much about Planet, for me, this is just an opportunity to introduce you to who we are. So at Planet IT, we're not just a cybersecurity specialist. We do much more than that, everything from outsourced IT support, telephone systems, internet connectivity, backup and DR, through to your general hardware and software procurement. We're essentially your one-stop shop for all things IT and all of your IT needs, backed off by a huge team of technical professionals with skills and accreditations across the board. So the one thing I'll always say is feel free to reach out when you have questions, because I'm sure that we've got someone in our company who's either gone through those challenges before, is accredited to deal with that problem, or maybe just has some insight for you. So we're always there, we're always ready to help you with whatever your IT challenge may be. So as I mentioned, you've got myself, James Dell, Head of Technical Architecture and Associate Director at Planet IT, joined today by Marlon Lars from Mimecast. So Marlon, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the lovely people joining us today.
Thanks very much, James. Thank you for having me on. I'm Marlon, I'm a technical consultant for Mimecast, and what we do generally is we look after the email security and your general cybersecurity well-being as well. So we try to, this is our slogan, is to stop bad things happening to good businesses. So that's the area of business that we're in. But thank you for having me on, James.
Much appreciated. And I think from a Planet point of view, working with Mimecast, this is, it's an opportunity to talk to you about some of the challenges that we're seeing in the wider email space. Because maybe when we're talking about security, and we have done in the past on these kind of webinars, email security is something that we kind of maybe lightly touch on. Today, we're really going to dive into that email security piece and hopefully look under the hood and see what's going on. At any point today, if you do have any questions, anything you think I really want to ask that, then please do use the live Q&A section on the side of your screen. Barry's already put some comments in there to show you that it's up and working. Any questions that you do put in there, even if there's something that maybe relates just to your business, feel free to ask them. Not everyone will see those. It only comes through to myself and Marlon. We'll answer some of those questions as and when is appropriate. Anything that's related to your business, we will skim over so that we're not directly affecting any of your potential security. If anything comes up that we can't answer directly today, what we will do is follow this up with answers to all the questions that get put into the system, as we do during every event. And then just to say that following today's webinar, you will receive a post-webinar survey. It's really beneficial for me and for the wider team at Planet if you can fill that out and answer those 5 short questions. It helps us design the content you're going to see from us later in the year and bring things to the table that are relevant to you. And be honest, if you think I'm terrible, then please tell us, and I won't take offense to that. But you will get a recorded link as well for today's webinar off the back of that, which will allow you to re-watch and reconsume this information at your leisure. And for everyone who does complete the post-webinar survey today, there is going to be the choice of a free cybersecurity health check or free Microsoft 365 health check to help understand your security landscape, especially around that email security piece. And we'll touch more on that towards the end of the webinar. So let's talk about it then. Let's get straight into the nitty gritty. So threats are on the rise, and we all know this. And what I've picked is 6 areas which we've seen are massively increasing and have been ever since 2020, since the change is that we're brought in by working from home, and maybe the changes that happen to many businesses in a kind of a forced manner. So the first major threat we're seeing on the rise is ransomware as a service. It is really easy now to get someone else to build your ransomware. You just purchase it and deploy it against your targets. Now, sounds a bit crude, but that's essentially what people are doing. Is these threat actors are looking for any way to monetize their skills, and what they're doing is designing ransomware that can be easily manipulated to work in any environment that then can be deployed by other people who are maybe less technical and maybe just want to cause disruption. So we're seeing that massively increase, and we're seeing a massive threat coming from that ransomware as a service area. The next one we're seeing a lot of problems with is brand impersonation. So it sounds on the surface like, oh, well, this has always happened. People have always pretended to be other people, but this is much more serious now. With the ability for you to instantly communicate, someone pretending to be your business can really dramatically affect the reputation of your business and maybe your income stream. So, people buying domains that are really close to what you use and then leveraging it as a fake website. We've seen this with fake Amazons, fake Googles in the past, but it's now going to a level where even your 10-user business may be targeted, and it may be to exploit your customers. It may be to leverage other services and use it to pretend to be yourself so they can gain access to credit lines or services from IT providers or telecoms providers, or even buying stuff off Amazon as your business because they have a website that looks like you. We're then seeing a lot of business email compromise or BEC attacks. Now, realistically, a BEC attack is a form of phishing, but it's attempting to trick your senior executives or budget holders into transferring funds, revealing sensitive information. They're playing on the naivety of some of maybe the senior staff in your business, people who maybe traditionally aren't really IT users and have been forced into it. That's what they're trying to look for, is people who maybe aren't as tech savvy as the IT team in a business. And they're trying to leverage that to get either IP, things they can steal from you, they can sell on, or more traditionally, just money. And that ties in with what I've put on the slide around invoice themed and interception emails, where a lot of the time they're tying this with invoices or emails that look like invoices, which are being sent. So you go, oh yeah, someone's asking for money from me, I better get this paid. People then tend to knee jerk and pay those bills, and then by doing so they open themselves up to risk. The other side of that invoice themed emails is the interception, where someone will get into your email system and will manipulate your invoices as they go outbound to change the sort code and the bank details so that your customers actually are paying the attacker, not you. And it takes a long time for that to be spotted, and we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. It's definitely something you should be aware of and is on the rise. Alongside that, all of these phishing attacks, these emails, will very often imply an urgent tone or something promising a reward. The promising reward side more comes from that kind of personal attack in terms of, oh, earn a £50 Amazon voucher. Oh, this reward is waiting for you. Oh, your delivery's not been accepted. And you can go into those kind of rabbit holes of providing credentials or clicking links, compromising your system. But the urgent email tone thing is something that's becoming more and more driven by the fact we're working from home, because people are more disconnected. So they're preying on the fact that you probably don't see your finance manager every day. So by sending an urgent email from you to your finance manager saying this bill needs to be paid, will often put the pressure on your teams to make incorrect decisions based on the urgency. And the final one that has always been around but is now so much more important is social engineering, looking at leveraging essentially social media, leveraging social media platforms, leveraging the way that people work to gain passwords, to gain credentials, to essentially twist your employees into doing what they shouldn't be doing and they know they shouldn't be doing. And this is where I always come back to that human firewall piece. This is why training your end users is so important, because the more social engineering attacks that happen, the more exposed your business is and the higher the risk level. Now, I literally have called this the scary stats slide, and that's no pun intended. This is, it is quite scary stats. So if we start with our first one, which is 52% of all phishing emails that occurred at the start of this year used LinkedIn in some method to target the users. So whether that was using information they gained from LinkedIn, whether that was impersonating being LinkedIn to get you people to follow it through, or whether that was, badging up saying that you had a new friend request or connection from LinkedIn. Those attacks were leveraging that social side of things, people's sort of need for engagement, how much the LinkedIn platforms become important to business with their sales navigator tool, leveraging that to get into systems. And 52% is quite high, which also shows you that your Apple's, your Microsoft's, your Google attack forms the rest of that 48%. So actually, that's a huge chunk of those emails that were coming in were around LinkedIn. Something that I've put on here, because maybe it's more of a training thing for your users, is 70% of emails that come from scammers have an empty subject line. 70%. So if you train your users to go, if it's got an empty subject line, I need to be more careful, and also train your users to never leave an empty subject line, you remove that attack vector to a certain degree, because you're suddenly going, well, we don't expect to see that in our business. So if we see it, we know to be vigilant to it, and we can start dealing with it. This is essentially come from scammers trying to get around mail filtering and put as little wording as possible into emails. Less wording, less chance of it being flagged, less chance of a tool like Mimecast picking it up. But ultimately, it's a great way for us to spot it as humans. And then the final one, the most scary figure for me, is that 54% of phishing attacks that were successful actually resulted in customer data breaches. So we're saying that over half of successful attacks actually then resulted in data being lost, which, when you think of how many hundreds of thousands of phishing emails go out every day, if 54% of them, when they're successful, actually get data as well, suddenly we've got a massive problem for a business that we need to jump on top of and be really attuned to stopping. What I wanted to come on to now is, in previous webinars, I've talked about the attack chain. So I've talked about the 7 steps. And when we talk about the 7 steps, normally we talk about ransomware, stuff like that. What I want to talk about today is how the email side of things fits into that 7 steps. So if we talk about step 1, reconnaissance, right? The first thing that we talk about in the attack chain is reconnaissance. Well, reconnaissance now is done really easily via email. An attack can come in with a threat actor embedding a special font, literally a pixel tracker in the content of the email, which is like a 1x1 tiny white square that you can't see, a silent WAV file. All of these kind of things can be embedded into an email, and that's the reconnaissance to say, is a person going to receive this email? If this email is received, does it reach a system? What information can I get back? And they're going to come back with information like location, engagement levels, whether the email was forwarded onto multiple accounts, and then what device, what operating system was in use. They're going to gain the reconnaissance, the information they need to leverage an attack.
Scary thing here, James, actually, is yes, you don't actually need to open some of these emails as well. Some of them, just by clicking on it, or some of them have no links. You're already providing the information via the trackers to the sender. So that's the scary thing here, is sometimes your users don't even have to click on it. They didn't even do anything wrong. It was just the fact that they've clicked on the actual email. It's already revealed that information to the sender. So that's the scary stuff that we're seeing.
Which is pretty terrifying, let's be honest, that the fact that you have to do nothing. If you don't have a decent level of protection in place before your email is delivered, then you've already opened the door, haven't you? That's the problem. It's no longer a case of, well, I've the user needs to be trained to do it. It's like, well, if the user is trained but you've already let it in the system, it's a bit late.
Exactly.
So in terms of delivery, obviously, the email gets delivered to an end user. As we've just talked about, an email can be delivered. Just hitting that mailbox is enough to have triggered some of this reconnaissance and given them a delivery platform. In some of them, it's going to be more in depth, it's going to be more targeted, it's going to be, you're going to need to engage with that. But ultimately, the delivery platform is email. So everyone is so used to reacting to emails in a rapid way that delivery platform is ultimately the biggest delivery platform for any kind of attack that we're seeing. across the entire spectrum, the most common form of attack comes in via email, and we see that in most ransomware cases. Most attack cases, we see that the original source was email. Once it's delivered, they then have the opportunity to install anything that they intend to install as part of this. So that could be ransomware that's off of a link in the email. It could be a silent attack, just gaining information about your system. Whatever they're going to do, they're doing that at the point that email's been delivered. If you haven't got mail filtering in place, you haven't got URL rewriting in place, and a user clicks a link, they suddenly get a packet downloaded onto their machine with an installation, which then gives that actor the ability to act on that machine. It then leads them into step 4, which is when they can take those actions on their objection. So they can literally start making good on their attack. Then we have the weaponization. At this point, it's a little bit too late to be doing anything at this point. By the time we've hit weaponization, what they're doing is they've already got access to your system, they've delivered it, they've managed to install a bit of software, they know what they're going to do, and they're off, and they're weaponizing it, and they're taking effect on your system. So, in terms of weaponizing a end user, let's be honest, the weaponization was in that delivery email. This is what they're trying to do, is they're trying to force you to act on behavior. So if you were to pay this account this money, suddenly they have weaponized it because they've got your cash. But if we're talking about this delivering ransomware or a payload, this could be as simple as having opened that email and downloaded a link. You would have done the same. They're then going to exploit you, whether that means they're going to exploit your system technically, they're going to leverage your technology, or they're going to exploit you financially. That is the same thing. The attack chain's the same. If they've exploited you financially, they could hold you to ransom and say, well, we've got X amount of your customers' money, you need to do X, Y, and Z, or they can continue just to exploit that money and continue to suck up your customers' funds until you notice, which could be several hours, several days, or in some cases a couple of months, until you start doing your banking runs and realizing that the funds from your customers aren't in there and they're telling you they've paid their invoices. And the final risk is obviously command and control, which is, they may have weaponized it and they may actually want to do more actions on your system. And at that point, that's when we're talking about like a delivery, a payload being delivered. Their weaponization, it may be preparing them to do a manual command and control of your system, to maybe steal IP, to maybe do anything else, control your email system. At that point, you've lost control of your system and the threat actor's in control. Marlon, over to you.
Perfect, thank you. So absolutely great showing and demonstrating the image in the head of where things go. It's no longer just about delivering the messages. It's protecting yourself from all angles as well, and the new types of attacks and threats that we're seeing. So this is exactly why we've actually developed this new product at Mimecast. So we've always looked at protecting emails, ensuring things don't land in the mailbox, but with the new evolving threats that we're seeing, Cybergraph is something that's actually been created for us. So next slide, please. Cybergraph actually does 4 main things, and this is to stop everything that James has just mentioned, to just help you guys out as well, and to maximize the efficiency of your users. So essentially, what Cybergraph does is, firstly, because Mimecast is your email security gateway, we take everything, all the emails flow through Mimecast first. So because they flow through Mimecast first, we render all those trackers, those special web fonts, those pixels, silent WAV files, all of them, any of them are rendered useless, because anything that requires a download or an action from that particular email, just clicking on it, whatever happens, whatever it needs, is done at the Mimecast level. So a lot of attackers really hate us because all the information they can actually get is just Mimecast, never your end users, never you as a customer as well. So we remove all those trackers. We then apply a lot of the machine learning and AI functions that happens behind the scenes. Now, what this does is it looks at your users' behaviors and email patterns. It has a look at who they have strong relationships with in order to know not to bombard them with notifications, because that's the key aspect here. The key aspect here is you can mark everything as suspicious. Maybe some of you guys have seen it already, where all external emails are just marked as external. This came from an external source, which is great. It was amazing 10 years ago, because if, let's say, for example, one of your users always speaks to someone externally, then they will expect to see on 100% of their emails the word external on all of their emails. So it kind of loses this value. It's something called banner fatigue. And what Cybergraph actually does is it uses that machine learning to see if it's actually necessary to apply the banners, which is the third aspect of Cybergraph. And the banners itself is dynamic. It's something that we give to your end users. So just again, to reiterate, by the time it gets to your end user's mailbox, we've already done all our checks, all the checks that we needed to do to ensure that it's not supposed to be there. But there are attacks that are a little bit gray, or some legitimate emails that are in the gray zone. So sometimes you may need to relax some of your security policies to start allowing these through, but sometimes you allow things that you're not supposed to also land in the mailbox. That's when these banners really come in. These banners will display when they need to be displayed, and that's the purpose of it, which I'll show you in the next slide. But just the final piece of Cybergraph as well is we also utilize this machine learning that it's already doing, and actually it's for compliance reasons, is to stop your users sending messages to the wrong people. Maybe autocomplete on Outlook happens, and instead of sending it to marlon@mimecast.com, it's sending it to Marlon or Melanie or someone else with an M at hotmail.com, or a different company altogether. And that is, if it's happened to some of you guys already, you'll be aware that, sometimes this is a serious offense where you're going to have to inform the ICO. Sometimes you can ask them, hey, please ignore that. Maybe there's nothing in there, so no bother. But sometimes it's very sensitive information that you guys are sending. And that's just the fourth aspect of what Cybergraph does as well. So the machine learning to ensure that you're not sending it to the wrong person. It will pick that up, stop it in transit, and ask your user, is this actually supposed to be you? Now, if you could go to the next slide, the banners, I'll show you a closer inspection of the banners itself. The banners is something that applies to emails that are required to have the banners. So what I mean by that is we've already looked at the machine learning. It's already assessed that it's got, it's not a strong communication, or that it actually requires this type of message. Now, these banners is essentially everything that we know at Mimecast that makes it suspicious. It's not suspicious enough to be stopped so that it doesn't land in a mailbox, but suspicious enough just to say, hey, you know what, just bear in mind, and there's a couple of examples that we have here, like the domain was created recently, or this is the first email to your company. Just because it's somebody's first email to your company doesn't necessarily mean it's actually malicious. It just means it's the first email to your company. But these little triggers, that's enough, because one of your greatest defenses are your users. You give your users a lot of training. You tell them, you allow them to learn. You tell them what to do. You may give them awareness training, for example, cybersecurity training, whatever it is that you do. But why don't we arm them with as much information as we can so that they can make an informed choice? So just remember, it hasn't triggered anything to stop it from landing in the mailbox, so it's landed in the mailbox. These are small things that we think that make it a little bit suspicious. Why don't we tell your user that? Rather than just saying external, rather than just saying suspicious, we're actually giving you the information why we think it is. And everything here is customizable as well. So you can actually customize the words to say, the domain was created recently. So if they ask for payment, reach out to IT, and you can put your phone number there, whatever it is. This is their first email to your company, so double check the email address, whatever it is that you like. One of the greatest things about this tool as well is the button there that you can see, which is the report or market safe. So if a user gets this message as well, if I show you in the next slide, they'll have the ability to mark the email as safe, dangerous, or spam. So let's say, for example, 20 people in your organization all got the same message. They all got that, tricky looking email that could have been the CEO, could be a customer. They don't quite know. It could probably trick 19 of your users, but there's one person that knows 100% that that's definitely fake. If all it takes is one person to click on that dangerous button, and then what will happen is the dynamic banners will change. I'll show you on the next slide as well. This is what it will look like. So it's not a new email. It's not a notification. It's literally on the email itself. It will change from the orange to the red. And this is how you can immediately notify anyone who's ever got that email. So no longer do you need to send out that mass email to say, hey, everyone who's ever got this message, please ignore it, please delete it whilst IT look to take it out of everyone's mailboxes. This is actually going to be on the actual email itself. And that way your users can see the color red, danger. It says dangerous on there, and the words, again, customizable. So you can say here, don't do anything with this email. We are aware, we're investigating, whatever it is. Now, when somebody does mark it as dangerous, it also notifies Mimecast as well as anyone that you want it to notify. So just in case you have those trigger happy users that just wants to mark everything as dangerous, it will go through someone as well to ensure that it's actually correct, to say that it's actually dangerous and it's not just flagging everything as dangerous. And the same with the safe option. If somebody marks it as safe, it's only safe for that individual. It's still suspicious for everyone else. One of the greatest things about here is the fact that we don't just leverage just your data. We use all our customers' data and threat intelligence. So if another customer has received this specific email that you've also got from your company, and we already know it's dangerous by the time it gets to your mailbox, if it's still already in the mailbox, then we'll apply these dangerous ones. However, we will also change our scanners to ensure it stops new threats from arriving in your mailbox, if that makes sense. So we will stop any new messages coming through to stop it. But if it's already in your mailboxes, this banner will be applied on all of those messages as well. So you're utilizing all 40,000 of our customers' threat intelligence with the power of the Cybergraph as well. So that's one of the beauties that we have with this. On the next slide, please. Just a few stats for you guys as well, so that you can see. We actually ran this for a customer in the US, just a random customer in terms of their figures as well. So we found that 1 in 5 emails, so 20% or 21% of emails had banners. And again, the beauty of that is you don't want to bombard your users with banners on every single email. If you put it on every single email, you're going to get that banner fatigue where they're going to stop paying attention to it. So it shouldn't be on every single one. It should only be applied where it's actually required. You've got 2 in 100,000 emails was reported as dangerous by users. So you've got your users helping you out here, where we're utilizing what knowledge they have in terms of what dangerous looks like. And then you have 1.5 in 1,000 emails already had suspicious banners elevated because of the intelligence that was sharing around. And 2 in 100, so 2%, was definitely dangerous after it had been verified by our security team and every customer security team as well. So all in all, 3 in 100,000 inbound emails were warned instantly against actual dangerous messages as well. And that is the true power of Cybergraph, and that's why it's so powerful. The fact that we're not just leveraging information that we know, not just the threat intelligence, but we're using you guys, we're using your users. That's the most important bit, and we're warning them as well. So let them make the informed choice, because who else better knows about that email, whether they expected it or not, apart from that user. Next slide, please.
I suppose before we move on to that, I've just got a question that's come up that I thought I'd ask you, Marlon, whilst we're at this point. With Cybergraph, those banners, what platforms do they appear on? Is it like only on Windows, or what can a user, if we've got users that are on the field on their phones, what can we expect to see that on?
Very, very good question. So because of the technology, the way that it actually works, it applies to every email client. So it doesn't matter. So on the images that I had, they were all mobile phones. That's correct. That's actually an image from a mobile phone. That was a screenshot. You've also got Outlook clients. You've got Mac. You've got whatever is Google. It works on every email client. So it's easy to implement. I suppose it's because we handle your emails. We apply it at the email level. That's what the how we are able to apply it.
I think it's good. I guess the reason the person's asking that question is because there is some other platforms on a legacy, I suppose, where that banner worked perfectly on Outlook on PC, but if your users are all using your Mac Mail or whatever it's called, the mail on your Mac OS, it didn't. None of those pop-ups appeared, so they could continue, responding to emails that were potentially threat-based, and they wouldn't have known anything. Whereas obviously with what you're talking about with Cybergraph, because it's doing that as part of that mail flow, it's actually resolving that issue out straight away.
Absolutely, it's a good point, and it was actually based off of some feedback as well that we got, where if you are marking things as external, sometimes if you're using a mobile phone, for example, you won't be able to see anything in the preview pane at all, because the external part is just taking up the whole thing. So there is no way for a user to see any info about an email except for actually clicking into it, and by that time it could be too late. The banners itself, the external banners that you could be applying, has done the opposite effect of actually making it worse for you rather than warning you, because now you can't see anything and you just want to have a quick preview. Is it one of my emails that I need to see? So that's the beauty of this as well. It doesn't cover the preview pane. It's when you open the email, it's going to be right there. It's going to show it to you as well in terms of the bright colors, and all the trackers, as I mentioned, would have already been removed by the time it gets to your mailbox. So safe either way.
That's pretty awesome. I suppose moving on, obviously the way that I see this and the way that we've gone through these slides, obviously Cybergraph definitely solves one part of the problem. And some of you on this call may have thought about SPF and DKIM, and obviously we're now going to talk about DMARC. And I suppose the reason I've put why is everyone talking about DMARC, I suppose for those of you who don't know what DMARC is, so DMARC, so domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance, which is the worst abbreviation I think possible, but we love abbreviations in IT. Essentially is using the tools of SPF and DKIM and essentially leveraging on top of that to say whether or not a receiver is genuine. So it's an authentication method to say whether or not this email is coming from who is expected, and it's a conversation between the sender and the receiving email systems to basically eradicate false emails or emails that are coming from non-authenticated sources. So why is everyone talking about DMARC? Well, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, they've all been around for a while. But realistically, DMARC is the one that people haven't implemented. SPF, DKIM, most of the people on this call, most of people that have got Mimecast or similar products, or even 365's native email, Google's native email, will probably have those tools implemented. But they're all functionally can be got round in some way. There's no end-to-end check to say this is definitely coming from a source that I trust and going to a source and matches along that process. And that's where the DMARC conversation wraps around. DMARC encapsulates that entire email chain, and we'll come on to technically how that works in a minute, but it encapsulates the entire process to say this email's come from somewhere that I trust and is going and matches what it should be. It stops that interception. It stops that someone impersonating your domain. It stops anyone being able to fraudulently or harmfully change your messages. It reduces your user exposure ultimately. So with that said, I said that DMARC is one of those things that people haven't really adopted, and this does my job for me. Going back as far as 2016 to last year, the end of last year, the number of organizations that had taken DMARC and implemented it is still massively low compared to the number of people who are sending and receiving emails every day. Back in 2016, when these DMARC.org started taking these stats, it was about 80,000 that were users, businesses that had this live. We're at 4 million now, but we're still, you think about all of those businesses that are sending emails, this is a global stat as well. This is not just a UK stat. We're a long way off everyone having this in place. So the risk is still there. So the reason I'm talking about this so much today, and I think it's really important to bring this conversation to the forefront, is because if you don't have this in place, you're missing a piece of the puzzle, and it's an obvious piece of the puzzle, to be honest with you. It's not something that we're coming up with some magical new technology or something we have to sell to you. This is something that you've probably your existing system's got in place, and it's something that can be implemented reasonably simply. So kind of the what's and why. So if you haven't got DMARC in place, everyone can use your domain for sending emails. Now, the best example of this that you probably all know of is your scanner in your office can do scan to email, and it will scan and send from, photocopier at yourdomain.com. But it doesn't actually have any authentication to be able to send that. You just normally can put an email address in, and it will spoof your email and it will send it. You have no visibility on outbound email. You don't know whether your emails are getting to where they're supposed to be going, whether they're being checked. Your partners with third parties, consumers, and other stakeholders are vulnerable because of this. You've got the standard risks that we've been talking about all this time, and we talk about in every one of these webinars: the risk of reputation, the risk of financial loss, data loss, and ultimately damage to your brand. And recovery can be massively expensive because email is the lifeblood of business. And if you go through the process of having an attack or something goes wrong because of your email system, it can affect everything in operation. It can be a nightmare. If you've got DMARC protection turned on and in place, you have full control over your outbound email channel. You can determine who can use your domains. You essentially allow senders and you trust senders. Essentially, you set those controls. You can create a safe and reliable environment for your customers, stakeholders, employees, and you can also then mitigate against any of those financial data losses, brand or domain reputational losses. You're not going to get your business marked down when we look at the domain blacklist, and because someone's been spoofing your domain and has been using it to spam emails out. You just won't see that anymore. Now, I have to say this, which is every conversation I've had with a customer over the last 12 months about DMARC, I've heard things like, oh, I can't do it because of third-party integration. It's too expensive. I've got applications that don't support it. My implementation is too complex. There's an SPF limits that causes me issues. The learning curve to get people in my team ready for it, to get the business ready for it. I've already got DKIM and SPF, so I don't really need it. Or I'm using Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, so I don't need any of these. These aren't excuses. They're not justifications for not having this solution in place. Ultimately, regardless of the fact that it's Planet IT and Mimecast talking to you about it today, and there's ways that we would do this, you can do this yourself with very little cost, and you just need to learn how to implement it. Most of your email systems already have the capability of doing this. It's just that you haven't got it implemented. There is always ways to support third-party integration. There's always ways to handle your legacy application support to make them fall inside of this trusted banner of DMARC. But ultimately, by not doing it, you are leaving yourself exposed, and the risks that come with it are your risks to take. And in most cases, as an IT manager or an IT director, going to your CEO or your board, or if you're an education provider, your governors, anyone who's looking after the organization, and saying, well, we got hacked, we lost data, we had these problems, our brand's been damaged because they got in and we didn't have DMARC in place. Your cybersecurity provider, your insurance provider, or someone coming in to help you will essentially say it's on you then, because you didn't do everything that was in your power to protect your system. And that's ultimately what we're talking about. Is forget about vendors, forget about products. This is about making sure that you're doing everything you can to protect your system. So I said I'd get on to technically how DMARC works, and I've tried to put a diagram together which is not too complicated, saying that it's still pretty complicated. So what we have in place is, as a sender on the left-hand side, you send your email via your email server. That could be an on-premise Exchange server, it could be 365, it could be Google Workplace. Your email is sent from your domain to a receiving email server. Now, at that point, that receiving email server will then check your SPF, your DKIM, and your DMARC records. Now, if your DMARC records, which Marlon will get on to explain how that's structured in a minute, is a pass, that email will drop into the inbox of the receiver. However, if it's a fail, then we've got some options. You can tell the email server to fully reject it, or you can say to mark it as spam. And obviously, if you've got products on your email server and you're receiving emails that set up for DMARC, and you've got tools like Mimecast, and you've got the ability to set that behavior for a DMARC failure, or a DMARC soft fail, essentially something to mark it as potential spam. But DMARC reports are then sent back as for people trying to respond to your domain. If you've got DMARC set up, it's reported back so that other people can look at that data and say, well, who is sending on behalf of X domain, your domain.com in this case, and does that data match what the sending email server and your marked public DNS records, which we'll get onto in a second, actually say you should be sending from, and the behavior. And that's how we start to build this information up. Now, if you're using a product like Mimecast to do DMARC for you, it doesn't read your emails. It's nothing to do with reading your emails. That it's nothing to do with the spam protection. It's all to do with the headers, and it's doing it in front of the email being received. So the email's not even getting to the point where it's hitting a mailbox. It's being checked. But ultimately, Mimecast doesn't read your emails. So that's, I know a lot of people have concern about DMARC and saying it will open up emails, and it doesn't do any of that. That's not what DMARC's about. DMARC's about flagging and protecting the fact that where you're sending from matches where that email is received from. So it's that relationship between the two and tying it off. Now, I'm going to let Marlon explain how this record works rather than me trying to explain it to you. So I'll hand over to you for this one.
No problem. So yes, absolutely. DMARC is literally this. This is it, because everything, the hard stuff is already in place. Just like your SPF and your DKIP. It's a record that you just need to add to your DNS. It's a TXT record, actually. You could actually just copy and paste what I have here, and you could actually get started with DMARC. Now, how it's broken down into 4 things, really. So you've got the V, which is basically just the version. I'll be honest with you, there are no other versions. So it's literally just DMARC 1. So V equals DMARC 1 is always going to be there and when you start this. If you guys are thinking about implementing DMARC, take note of this, because this is literally how you start it off. Just the next one as well is the P. Now the P just stands for policy. And this is just like what James said, this is where you will finally now get control of your messages, or someone trying to pretend to use your domain and it not even touching you. It might be that they're targeting someone that you regularly email. They are, as just imagine a burglar is not trying to attack your house. The burglar is actually trying to attack your neighbor, and they're pretending to be you. Normally you can buy the best locks and defenses for yourself. You can buy great laser doors, or machine, whatever, for your doors, the vault doors. But are you going to pay for every one of your neighbors to also be protected? And the answer is you shouldn't, because you can, just as long as you implement DMARC, that's it. And the policy, there's 3 policies that you can have, just like what James mentioned. You can have something called none, which is where everyone should start with. P equals none. Everyone should start with that. The other 2 options you have is quarantine or reject. And essentially what that means is, hey, Mr. Recipient, you've just received a message from me. If it fails DMARC, do this policy. So that's why everyone should start off in none. It literally means, hey, if you've received an email from me and it doesn't pass DMARC, don't worry, just let it in anyway. Everyone should start off there, because the none does not affect your mail flow whatsoever. So if you were to implement it today, there will be no difference in the deliverability of your messages, whether it's lost, whether it doesn't make it to the mailbox or not, or it does, it has no impact. The DMARC record would just not affect it at all. If you switched it to a quarantine or a reject, they will actually affect your mail flow. So that's the reason why you shouldn't start off with the quarantine or reject. The aim is you should try to get to a reject policy, but that's the journey. That's the journey of DMARC. That's when you are in a comfortable position to actually move to a reject. The next 2 sections is just the RUA mail to, which RUA stands for the aggregate reports, and then your RUF, which is basically the forensic reports. They're the 2 types of reports that effectively you're asking every recipient to send you. So what you're going to put here is an email address of your choice. So effectively, you guys could start DMARC for free today if you wanted to, by just placing an email address in there. And that's it. That's all there is to it. What that email address is you're telling everyone to send you a report to that particular email address. So I wouldn't recommend that you send it to your own email addresses, because trust me, you don't want that volume of email. I'd recommend you all to create a designated one, or if you're going to use a tool like Mimecast, we provide you an email address for you to send it to, because what effectively you need to think of is how many emails do you send out? Does your company send out, or your domain send out daily? Think of that, and think of that many emails or reports coming back to you to let you know the results of them, to say, yep, it passed SPF, it passed DKIM, or it didn't pass DMARC. So on the next slide, we're actually going to show you what an aggregate report looks like. Well, sorry, these are more in-depth information as to what the non-quarantine and reject policy actually mean. As I mentioned, none just basically means don't do anything. Quarantine is put in your junk folder, and reject means just get rid of it. It's not me. That's the end goal. But the way that how DMARC Analyzer works, so now this is where Mimecast come in, is for every single email that you send out, that's what you're going to get back in the report. And this on the left is actually an aggregate report. So as I mentioned, you can start it today, but this is what you're going to see. Without any kind of tools, any DMARC tools that will interpret this data, it's going to be very difficult for you. And this is the reason why you can see the adoption rate that James showed earlier on. There was a low adoption rate for people to use DMARC, and then all of a sudden it was just spiking up. This is why it's a topic of conversation that everyone's having now. And that's because it's so hard back then to read what that is. It still is, but we now have more and more tools like Mimecast DMARC Analyzer that will convert that kind of information into a user interface. So if on the next slide, you're going to see this is what we will show you in Mimecast. So we'll provide all that data into a way for you to be able to understand exactly what your next steps are. Because that is it. Every single tool that reads DMARC, all of them, any other ones that convert that data into a user interface, their goal is to make it easy for you to understand what's happening with your mail. How many people are spoofing you? How many people are actually succeeding in contacting your customers? How many of your mail is actually coming from where you think it's coming from? Is it actually coming from Office 365? Is it actually coming from somewhere else? Is it coming from MailChimp? You'll get to see all of that information, and also whether or not it's passing SPF, DKIM, or DMARC. So I've actually got some snippets on the next screen of what type of information that we're going to be able to show you. So this is an example of what you're going to see. You're going to have color coding, just to make things easier. The volume of emails we're seeing, so green is good. We're seeing 11 million emails past DMARC, great. But then you have 5 million emails that's failing. Now, why this is important is, as I mentioned earlier, we've got those policies. You've got the none, quarantine, and reject. If, for example, you saw this today, these are your results, and you change your policy from a none to a quarantine, then effectively it means 11 million emails are making it through to the destination, great. But 5 million emails will now be in the junk folders. So your deliverability of those messages will be affected. If you switch this to a reject policy, that's 5 million emails that will never land in your intended recipients' mailboxes. They're just gone. So you can't just jump into a quarantine or a reject too quick. Otherwise, it will affect your business. Imagine not being able to send, or let's imagine 1/3 of your emails never land in your customers' mailboxes. So that's why it's very important that you get the DMARC journey right, and that's what the tool does. So on the bottom screenshot, you can see it breaks down the failed section. It breaks down who the host is, what IP are we, did it come from? Why is it not passing DMARC? So here you can see it's not passing DMARC because DKIM has been set incorrectly or SPF has not been set. Then what you'd need to do at this point, because now you know what the next steps are, is fix your SPF and DKIM for this source. And then eventually you'll start to see this source move into the green section. And that's the journey. Once you get all the legitimate sources that you have into the green zone, that's when you move to a quarantine or you move to a reject policy. And that's how you're protecting your reputation, by ensuring that it's only your messages that are actually making its way to the customer's mailboxes. And that's why everyone is talking about DMARC.
Yeah, amazing. That's you're right to mention that kind of during that journey. Sorry, where your accent came on that. To down that path in terms of start from a point of view of just getting it in place, and then move towards that hard stop position. Where you are protecting your brand and you're doing all those pieces you need to. I suppose the reason I've bought this full stack IT backup, the full security stack as we talk about, is I've done these kind of webinars with you before, and you've seen that we talk about endpoint security, might talk about encryption, web filtering. What we've talked about today is this kind of bubble in the middle, that email security. As I mentioned at the start, we don't really talk about it that often. But actually, there's quite a few bits that fit into that email security. So when we talk about endpoint, there's some products that fit into there, some from approaches. And really, when we talk about email security, this is what we're talking about. So we've mentioned today DMARC, but we're also talking about, at a very basic level, mail filtering, actually that baseline protection. Then we're talking about tools like DKIM, SPF, brand protection, and end user awareness training. All of that sits in that kind of email security bubble. It is the biggest public facing vector of attack you have, and there is technologies designed to protect it. But this is the one area that I often see people neglect when I'm having conversations with new customers, with people coming from elsewhere. Most people have a product for endpoint protection. They'll have encryption sorted. They'll have their email and web filtering sorted because they're requirements from, that they've brought with them. But the email security piece, they tend to go, well, my provider does that. And it's that assumption that your 365s and your Google workspace of the world are doing all these bits for you. And the honest answer is they're not. They will do what they have to, but a lot of these technologies are things you have to configure and set up. And if you go and register for a new 365 domain today, it will not ask you to set up DKIM, SPF, or DMARC as part of that. You can go further and set those up, but you have to find that and know how to do that. On the base setup, all they do is do your DNS entries and put very basic mail filtering in place. Anything beyond that is something you have to look at a dedicated security product, something that can look after those pieces for you. And that's where, like today, the conversation with Mimecast comes in, is wrapping those pieces up into a product stack that can look after your email security. So as I mentioned at the start, there is a post-webinar survey. You've covered all those pieces. In terms of this health check, obviously, if you don't know if you've got DKIM, you don't know if you've got SPF, you don't know if you've got DMARC, you don't know what mail filtering you've got, you're not sure if you're up to scratch, please do this survey and then speak to your account manager and select the free cybersecurity health check. One of our trained security professionals will look at your environment and help you down that road to getting your email into a secure position. If you're a 365 customer, we can do a 365 health check and look at that in great detail and see where your configuration for that platform is, look at your compliance and your configuration, and help you continue to make the journey towards a safer, more secure environment. Now, I have got some questions to go through, so Marlon, I'm going to fire them mostly at you, and I'll try and answer the ones I can. I suppose the first question I've kind of touched on, but I wanted to get your take on it, which is, do people still need a traditional mail filter in place if they're looking at AI technologies and other pieces from the likes of Mimecast?
Yeah, good question. For us, the approach is always to layer your security. There's definitely elements that are great from different sources that you can have as well, but when you have AI, machine learning, or any of that, there's things that they look at specific things. They're looking at a particular way of emails. There's different elements, as I mentioned before, that make something a malicious email. There's different things, different factors. There's gray areas. What's false positive? What's a false negative? There's many things like that. So that's why when you start to layer these technologies around each other, when you include the mail filtering as well, is you're improving your chances of it being caught, and you're effectively allowing yourself the ability to granularize the scoping of those policies, so that you can start to adjust them to be more specific to you as a customer as well as an end user, so that you can start to decrease some parts and increase certain parts. And again, it's all because there's not one size that fits all. That's probably the best approach, and that's why we go for the layered approach.
Amazing. The next question is sort of straight onto around the Cybergraph piece and around how easy to navigate the portal is for managing those the blocks and the kind of dangerous, not safe, how easy that is, how user friendly that is. I'm assuming that's something that the question really leans on. Will this be something that we need IT support to look after? Or is this something that our end users can manage?
So good point. So there's elements of it where it's a plug and play. You do what you need to do and then you leave it alone and then that's it. So there's elements of you can make the adjustments, you could customize it, you can change the settings, you could change the wordings, or you can have automated reports go to specific people so that you don't really have to be in the platform itself. There's other elements as well where if somebody marks something as dangerous, it notifies a specific person, and whoever that notified person is, they will be able to change the banners as well. So if, for example, somebody's just marking everything as safe, even though we know it's dangerous, they can override that. That administrator can override that. Same thing with dangerous. If someone's just marking things as dangerous, it will go through to the administrator first. They will decide whether this is actually legitimately dangerous. So there's actually two steps that happen. When somebody marks something as dangerous, it actually goes to the administrator, but it also sends it to Mimecast. So it's actually whoever gets there first, whether it's your administrator or Mimecast, that notifies you and say, actually, that's not dangerous. Let's deflag that, or it actually is dangerous. Yes, let's definitely flag that. It's whoever gets there first. That's kind of how it is. But in terms of how easy it is, it's not complicated at all. I know that it's bias coming from me, but it's literally you've got the users' names, you've got their action, you've got a revert button next to it in terms of do you want to change back what they've done. You've got an area where it's just full of stats. If all you're interested in is stats, the different types of banners. There's an area specifically for trackers, so that it shows you the different trackers that we've removed, and you've got a search function on there. So we've designed it in a way to be as simple as possible, so that you know exactly what's on the screen. So everything should be able to be self-explanatory on that page.
Amazing. You did kind of answer another question that was in there, and I'm just going to recap that. So someone asked about if someone tags an email as dangerous and realizes it's not dangerous later on, how is that updated for everyone else? Well, as Marlon just said, you've obviously got the person and you've got Mimecast reviewing that, so it's not just going to instantly mark as dangerous for everyone, is it? If it's until someone else has confirmed that it actually is dangerous, as it were.
Correct, absolutely. That's just to hold off on causing panic to the rest of your company. But also, you've got the revert button yourself. As an end user, you've got the undo button. So just in case you've got fat fingers like me, when you accidentally slip up and you accidentally press dangerous rather than the safe, you can undo that function as well if necessary.
Amazing. So there is a couple of other questions that I'd love to have got to, but we are running out of time. There's a few questions on there around product-specific questions versus other products. Now, we'll reach out to you directly to answer those questions, purely because it's obviously not the right forum to talk about your specific challenges, but we can do that. I do realise we are bang out of time now. So first of all, obviously, if you do want to get in touch and you want some more information, my email address is on the screen, my telephone number is on the screen. Feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. If there's things we've touched on today you'd like to get a bit more detail on, or you want to just scratch that itch a bit more, feel free to reach out on the numbers and email on the screen. But finally, it comes to me to thanks Marlon for joining us today and giving up your time to go over these products, and really to thank all of you for joining this call and taking the time to understand the current threats that are out there and how AI can help you overcome those challenges. So Marlon, thank you very much, and to everyone else, I hope you have a good afternoon and we'll speak to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good day. Thank you.